Now we have a real treat. As I mentioned when we kicked this off, the State Auditor's Office in Washington State is the most powerful state auditor's office anywhere in the country. And that was made even more clear when the people through Initiative 900 gave the state auditor the power not simply to do financial audits, but also to do performance audits, to go out and ask questions about whether local governments or government agencies were actually, not just, being defrauded or something, not doing the math right, but were they actually getting the best bang for the taxpayer's buck? So that's what the State Auditor's Office is about. I have a friend who works in one of the regional offices, and it's amazing, and the state auditor has a presence all around the state. If you're in local government, you know how important this office is, because this is the one place in state government where they really know what goes on in every county, every city, every public utility district, port district. The state auditor's office reaches down into all of these places to see how they're doing business, to help them improve their practices, to look for actual fraud and waste. And so we're going to hear a debate between three of the candidates running for this office, and learn a lot about what the state auditor does. And I'm going to turn it back over to Blake Knobloch, our Radio Free Washington co-host and co-owner of Cigar Daddies down in Lacey. If you're heading south on I-5, make sure you swing in there once they're open and pick up some cigars, I guess.
Yeah, I appreciate that shameless plug. Thank you. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for being here this evening. I appreciate it. As Trent said, we're going to start off tonight with our yes and no questions. So I've got a few of those that we'll start off with. And then later on in the debate, if you'd like to expand on those, you can. But first, we'll do our 5-minute introductions. And Mark Miloscia, we'll start with you.
Thank you for having us here and listening to the State Auditor's Office. The State Auditor's Office, while it may be one of the most visible and I think powerful office here in Washington State, not too many interest groups and people actually care about it. But if you go to the voters, they very much care about what the State Auditor's Office accomplishes. My name is Mark Miloscia. Currently, I'm the state representative from Federal Way. I've been serving there for 14 years. Before that, I worked at Tacoma Goodwill Industries, where I ran their industrial service division. Was an executive director for a mental health agency. And before that, I was in the U.S. Air Force. I flew bombers, B-52 bombers, Boeing, for those of you who like Boeing products. And they picked up my MBA, and the Air Force sent me here to the Northwest. Eventually, I ended up running the B-1 program for the Air Force. I was a contract manager of the $2.8 billion program, and that's where I got involved with performance audits for the first time. For those of you here, do you remember the procurement scandals of the late 80s? The $700 toilet seat cover, $600 hammer? I was involved in the middle of all that, though the items I discovered in my audits didn't make the news like some of my colleagues. But I literally discovered a $8 light bulb that cost the Air Force $500. That's the power of performance audits, is to identify waste and poor performance and bring it to attention to everybody. Well, actually, believe it or not, that hurt me. I take pride in my work as an Air Force officer serving our country, trying to do the best when I was running this bomber program, but we made mistakes. Back then, Boeing and the Air Force and a lot of government agencies learned that we had to do better. We weren't serving the public correctly. Since then, I made it my mission in life to improve government, to restore trust in your government. That's the values I picked up in the U.S. Air Force. And that's, in fact, the values I picked up working at Tacoma Goodwill. It's all about trust with the people you serve, to make sure that our governments, who we pay our hard-earned taxes, is efficient and effective. Since then, I got involved with quality and tried to instill performance and quality management and performance excellence in everywhere I went. I tried it and implemented quality management systems at Goodwill, at Lake Haven Utility District, where I was an elected official. And I ran on that to become a state representative. And we talked about the performance audit that Brian Sontag does. I passed the first performance audit bill, sponsored the bill 1 year before Tim Eyman, to give Brian Sontag and his office the authority to do performance audits, independent audits, just like I did back there in the Air Force. And guess what? We passed a bill, $3 million, small amount, some restrictions. I didn't like it, so I went out and I endorsed Tim Iman's I-900. I got in a lot of trouble with my colleagues. Sponsor the bill. In fact, Tim Iman mentioned me in the voter's pamphlet that he had the support of the person who passed the legislative bill because I knew Tim Iman's bill was better. $30 million, real teeth to improve government. That's how passionate I'm about this issue. And since then, I passed bills saying that all agencies have to have a quality audit, a Baldrige audit each and every year. In fact, I made it mandatory. Unfortunately, I just learned 3 days ago, the governor decided to ignore that statute, and she's eliminated all quality audits of all state agencies this year. Well, I'm going to hold her accountable, and I need your help to do that. My goal as state auditor is restore trust in government, to make heroes of public service again. Heroes of state agencies, rather agencies that act like the way they do now. I assume here, how many people are happy with government service? The mismanagement, the horror stories that you hear every day in, day out. We can be better than that. Government can be run as well as the best in the private sector. I've audited hospitals, colleges. I've audited the private sector, and I've audited the public sector. We need good management, we need to invest in our employees, and we need to hold each and every agency accountable. That's what I intend to do as state auditor, to measure every agency, give them a grade, so you all see the grades. What agency is effective? Which ones are wasteful? Which ones are ethical? You give them a grade, people change. We all know that. That's true accountability. I, in fact, passed a bill exactly to give a grade to every state agency. Unfortunately, it was vetoed by our governor. Well, as state auditor, I will give agencies grade. That's my mission and promise to you. And how will you know the state auditor's office is doing a good job? Well, I'll be graded by you. My goal is to restore trust in government, make it efficient, effective, and ethical, make you proud of your government. That's what I intend to do. And you will be grading me whether I hold myself accountable to that thing. It'll be on the web, unedited, unvarnished. That's my promise to you. We need to get the government that you deserve and that you want. And it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican, liberal or conservative. Performance is non-ideological, non-partisan. All my bills were that way. Thank you very much for listening to me. Mark Malosha.
Thank you, Mark. And Troy Kelly, your opening remarks.
Thank you. I'm Troy Kelly, one of the candidates for state auditor. I'm a state representative. I think tonight we're going to hear a lot about the office, what some of our goals are. And we know that this office does keep government accountable and needs to do it more. We know that this office is really the vanguard for open government as well. I'm going to take just a little bit of time to talk about my background, why I think I'm qualified for this office. 2 out of the last 3 years, I was the chairman of JLARC, which is the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee, the audit committee of the legislature. We had some tough studies. We had priorities of government that we established there, right there in an open committee. We actually got it done. A lot of people talked about setting priorities of government. We actually got that done. In addition to that, in addition to being the legislative audit team, the JLAR committee is also the hearing board, the only hearing office for the I-900 audits. So I work closely with Brian Sontag over the last couple of years to hear those audits and give them, again, a public hearing. And some of those were controversial. I think we moved in the right direction on a few of them. The consolidation of some of the healthcare issues we've talked about with the teachers. I know people voted differently up here on those issues, but again, I think that was extremely important. In addition to that, way back in my career, I worked at the Department of Justice and the Securities Exchange Commission. At the latter, I was a regulatory auditor. I traveled around the country making sure that different parts, different agencies did not overstep their regulatory bounds. That's one of the key components of what our state auditor does. We talk about performance audits a lot. Yes, that's important. There's also financial audits, which are very important, both at the state level and what we call federal or single audits, where you audit federal dollars coming through to make sure that there's no waste, fraud, or abuse. And the office also does regulatory audits. So the office is not just performance audits. That's a critical part of the office, but there's definitely more there. Those were kind of the bookends of my career. Let me tell you about the middle a little bit. In addition to being an auditor, the person that runs this office is a manager. You have to have management experience. I have a couple different areas of management experience, one running my own company in quite a few different states. Previous to that, I worked for a large Fortune 500 company, first as their general counsel, and then running 2 of their different subsidiaries. In both those positions, for me, I had to have performance measures and performance audits to make sure that these offices were functioning, because I was not there watching these offices. I could see, P&L, that was important, but there's other critical factors. In terms of this business, it was orders per employee. That's something that we looked at. That's something that was very critical. So those things go into my background. I see the questions are all very specific about what we'll do when we get there, so I guess I'll hold off on those. Thanks.
And James Watkins, your opening remarks.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Are we having fun yet? Yeah. All right. My name's James Watkins, and I'm running to be your state auditor. We're here tonight as part of the political process to hire a replacement for Brian Sontag. Brian has been our state auditor for 20 years, and he has been the wonderful state auditor. He has done a great job and is recognized as being outstanding. He is the most popular political figure in Washington state. He got more votes in the last election than President Obama. He got more than Rob McKenna. He got 1.7 million votes. He got those votes because the citizens of Washington state trust Brian to be independent, to look after their interests in Olympia, and to do the right thing for taxpayers. Now he's retiring, and we need a replacement. Now, there are 4 of us that are running for this office. I'm the Republican in the race, and we have 3 Democrats. The difference is going to be clear that citizens have in this race, and stark. It is me against the politicians and against the sitting legislators. In the 23 years since I earned my MBA, I put my experience to work in the federal government and the private sector for nonprofits, doing performance audits, doing performance reviews, working to help make organizations faster, more efficient, and more effective. And I believe to my core that we need more of that in Olympia and not less. I've been an executive and a principal consultant in services firms of up to 600 professionals. State Auditor's Office has about 350, so the experience there is directly related to running that. I've helped start businesses and help failing organizations recover. The work that I've done has been for organizations like the FDIC, NASA, Space Station Freedom. I've done work in the nonprofit sector for organizations like the World Trade Centers. I've done work for private companies, little companies, here locally in Redmond like Microsoft, other companies, HP, Intuit, a whole bunch of tech companies, a whole bunch of small startups, and literally hundreds of very small businesses that are starting I've worked with one way or another. We need more of that in Olympia. So one of the very clear differences that you're going to hear tonight is this difference between me and my opponents in this race. And the first difference is very clear. Organizations, executives and organizations, pay me for my work, for my advice to help make their organizations faster. There's a big difference between being a professional and being an amateur. My opponents, on the other hand, come from the legislature where they vote for a living. And boy, do they vote. This year, they thought it was a fine idea to balance the budget by using accounting tricks and leaving us with almost no reserves. Each of these guys has voted to raid the citizens-approved performance auditing funds to sweep them out into other general accounts. They've all voted to divert those funds away from the auditor. Each of these guys even voted to eliminate the measly $5 penalty for blocking access to government records. But the fact is, Washington voters are fiscally conservative. We have voted overwhelmingly against a state income tax. We have voted overwhelmingly for a 2/3 majority to raise taxes. And the reason that we did that is because we don't trust the legislators to look after our money in Olympia. And it's a shame that it's come to that. The taxpayers deserve better than that. State employees, municipal employees deserve better than that. And so this is going to be a very, very interesting race as we choose whether we're going to have an independent auditor or whether we're going to have somebody that comes from the legislature and has voted for these taxes, voted for the spending, voted for the other programs that we're now having trouble with. And it occurs to me as I look at this that hiring a sitting legislator is kind of like hiring a fox to watch your hen house. That has never worked in the history of the world. So tonight, listen to our answers and judge for yourself. Don't be fooled by the smoke and mirrors, and listen to the substance. Listen to what we've actually done and what we are bringing to the table in our ability to actually carry this forward and do good things for the taxpayers of Washington State. Because now more than ever, I believe we need professionals in Olympia. We already have enough politicians. My name is James Watkins, and I'm running for your state auditor because I want to be your watchdog in Olympia. This election is about performance, not politics. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. We are now going to go into our yes and no questions. I've got 3 of them for you. The first question that we have, there have been questions about the costs and benefits of performance audits. Do you believe the state auditor should have performance audit authority?
Seriously?
That's the first question. And they're all agreed. Question number 2, do you think the legislature has been serious enough in addressing the results of recent audits? And our final yes or no question, would you request legislation that gives the state auditor more authority? Okay. Gentlemen, we're going to go down the table to start with questions. You'll each have 90 seconds. Whoever answered first will have 30 seconds rebuttal. Mark, we're going to start with you. Your first question this evening. Accountability comes with a price tag. This can be particularly difficult on the smallest local governments. What would you do to help small jurisdictions deal with the audit process?
I've been traveling out talking to local governments. I have performed audits. I've been on the receiving end of audits. The simple thing, how you accomplish audits correctly, is you measure the performance of your audit. I believe, and it's one of the reasons why I'm running for state auditors, that every audit needs to be cheaper, faster, and better than the one before. The purpose of an audit is to go out there and help improve the local governments, add value where they benefit. You don't decide whether it benefits. The customer, the local government, the client decides the benefit. So my goal is to go out there and provide value to whoever we audit to measurably improve their performance. I would like it to be where people come to the point where people are inviting the state auditor's office in to help them for an audit to help improve their organization. As I mentioned before, I will be having the office graded on our audits. From the clients, from the stakeholders, the people that we audit will be grading our performance measurably. Are we making it more efficient? Or were we fair and just? We're asking the right questions. Did we treat the employees right? Did we add value to there? So that's how you hold yourselves accountable. And just like this question here is, are we improving results? Audits is all about helping an organization improve. And that separates me from the others because I've actually done that. An audit is not a gotcha. Audit is actually, you mentioned the fox in the hen house. I'll use another metaphor. Bull in the china shop. You don't improve organizations by being a bull in the china shop.
Troy, your response?
Or I think I'll just add on to that question. There's a couple things that I would do specifically. In other states, they've sometimes had audits where the cost exceeds any potential savings. So I would confirm that we're not going to do that before we do an audit, and particularly with these small jurisdictions. I think the current auditor has done a good job there, but particularly this second issue, I think he's done a great job, and I think we need to continue to do this. We need to provide assistance to those being audited. I know we do that already, but if we can do that, that will cut their costs, and that's critically important for them, the local jurisdictions.
And to you, Mark.
James?
No, James, I'm sorry. And to you, James. I apologize.
We might be swapping names later. It's
I'm sorry.
Mike's early. Before I start, I just want to point out that Mark has sort of made a fundamental error in kind of the thrust of the auditor's office. The clients for the audits are not the local municipalities and not the local government. It is the taxpayers. And if Mark thinks that he is serving the local governments, that's wrong. Now, let me say nobody likes in the private sector to pay their auditors either. But it's something that you have to do, and it is something that's required. The task is to get a good audit for a reasonable price and do it in a way that is going to be cost effective. Now, I think that I'm probably the only guy up here that's actually done that in a services organization where I've worked with my employees, I've worked with various people that are providing those professional services to keep the cost down and the services up. And that is something I can certainly do at the State Auditor's Office. But let me say that the State Auditor's Office provides tremendous value to the local governments in Washington State. In terms of the chargebacks, they are at a level far below that of the private sector. And I think that they are offering tremendous, tremendous professional services to the local folks. On the performance audit side, one of the things that I would really like to do is to use those performance audit funds that the citizens granted to the auditor to help the local organizations really adopt more quickly to the performance audits and really take benefit of that by helping defray some of their costs and working with the state auditor's office. And then let me just close by talking a little bit about, oops, I'm running out of time. Let me just say that the local officials are already asking me to come in and do performance audits with them because they want to make improvements in their local areas. And so I think that is something that we will certainly see going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And Mark, you do get 30 seconds for a response.
Well, James did get one thing wrong, though. The issue about auditing is provide value. The ultimate customer is the citizen. The citizens in our state. Do they want a bull in a china shop to destroy state agencies, or do they want to improve them? The citizens will be judging the results of the state auditor's office. I can say it a zillion times, but that's how you will measure. You will be measuring the results, whether the things get done right. But you're also there to serve the stakeholders and the local governments, improve their organization. Because if you are that bull in the china shop, and maybe James doesn't know this, but every single place in the country, the auditor has his funding taken away. We don't want that to happen.
Excuse me, I need a response here. Am I being accused of being a bull in a china shop?
I'll let you guys duke that one out in the parking lot later.
I am the only guy that's actually sat across the table from actual real clients and gets hired.
Are you going
by
to take
those
control of
guys.
this audit?
Making me nuts.
Thank you. Troy, this next question, we're going to start with you. Auditing and publishing the results is one thing. Getting the legislature and the agencies to make real changes is something else. What would you do to encourage policymakers and agency leaders to act on your findings?
Well, in some respects, I'd follow what Brian Sontag has done. He's worked with the governor, trying to get her to move on some of these audit findings. He's worked with the legislature. I think as a former, soon-to-be former, either way, legislator, I think if I was in the position of state auditor, I would push out what we call green sheets. It's where the executive office, be governor, AG, state auditor, they put the weight of their office behind the proposed legislation. They get a senator or representative to sponsor the bill, since they still can't sponsor a bill, and they move forward there. I think those are some critical areas that we have to jump on right away, and I would do that.
Great. James, 90 seconds.
Yeah, so the first thing you need is a governor and a legislature that actually care about improving performance and really put a focus on that in their government. And we're going to have a change of management in Olympia next cycle. Both of our gubernatorial candidates, Rob McKenna and Jay Inslee, both said they're going to make performance auditing and increasing performance in government a priority. And so I think we're going to see support from the governor's office either way. The other thing we're going to see is we're going to see a massive change in the legislature. In this race alone, I predict that 3 sitting legislators will lose their seats. And going forward, we're going to see, I think we've got 23 open seats or something like that, maybe 24 now in the legislature. So we're going to see a whole crop of people coming in, most of whom are running on the idea of good government, making it more effective and so forth. Because the fact is that there is no more free money in Olympia. Citizens are not allowing these guys to raise taxes. They're not going to give any more money to Olympia until we prove to the satisfaction of taxpayers that we can do well in state government with the funds that we're given. The only way that we're going to be able to invest in the things that we want to invest in, education, transportation, infrastructure, public safety, social services, and so forth, is to get more efficient at what we are spending our money on now. And I think the legislature and the governor have a huge interest in that. So we're going to get a lot of good progress in the next couple of years.
And Mark, of course, the same question for you. Auditing and publishing the results is one thing. Getting the legislature and the agencies to make real changes is something else. What would you do to encourage policymakers and agency leaders to act on your findings?
Again, it's what I said before. The auditor can only make recommendations for the improvements. You need to have that trust with the elected officials, with the stakeholders, with the professionals, that you know what you're doing, that you have that competence, that you're working in a fair, non-political manner. You need to get that trust and actually provide real value. If you're a bull in the china shop or you get too political, then the office gets ignored, or the office gets the money taken away. In almost every single state in this nation, if you handle that trust issue wrong, if you have a gotcha going after local governments, what happens is, and it literally happened to just a recent city just last month, their audit program was taken away from their independent auditor. We don't want that in our state. We want to bring all the elected officials, bring the locals together to share that vision with what the public is demanding. The public is demanding better government. They want the best in our state. So we have to get all the elected officials and all the agency directors to buy into that vision, to sell that vision to the public. If you're that bull in the china shop, guess what? Your power's taken away and we're set back 20 or 30 years. We don't want that in our state.
And Troy, you have 30 seconds for a response.
Yeah, just one area that I would like to add. The state auditor, since he is limited in what he can do, he can also go to the press. And whether government's doing something correctly, it should be patted on the back. When they're not, it should be pointed out. And sometimes the only way to get the legislature or the governor to act is by going through the press.
James, we're going to start this next question with you. There have been efforts to allow someone other than the state auditor's office to audit local school districts or other governments. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, I think that depends greatly on sort of the cause behind that, why they want to, in fact, make that change. It was actually, I think, one of our friend, Senator Pridemore, that started that effort. And in general, that is not a good idea. It doesn't go according to federal law, which requires certain audits at certain times. The Auditor's Office does a great job auditing schools, auditing those kinds of organizations, and of course that failed in this legislative session. It's not going to succeed going forward. I want to jump back to a second ago when Mark is talking about bull in the china shop, which is entertaining and stuff, but it's a very serious thing, and he's talking about the legislature taking away the Office of Auditor and so forth. Well, these guys already tried to do that. They already took away their performance auditing money. They swept it from the state auditor's office, and they actually used that to use tax assessors and so forth to go after private citizens. They flipped that completely around. The fact is that in Washington State, citizens created I-900 or passed I-900 to create performance audits and to allow the auditor the independence of the legislators to go out and do the right thing for the taxpayers of Washington State. And if the legislature believes that they can cut that off, they're going to have an initiative the next year that's going to give the auditor more power and authority than ever before. Thank you.
Mark, you have 90 seconds.
Well, on the first part, James was absolutely right. I think the auditor is doing it, handling as far as the authority versus private versus public, absolutely correct. And so I don't want to add anything other than that.
And your response?
Well, I think he's going to respond my initial comments. I think I'd like to add a couple things in terms of the question of outside people auditing. As long as the authority, as Mark said, and I think James has said, remains with the state auditor, there are issues where you get experts in there that you do retain from either within the office or without the office, outside the office. I think that is something that is acceptable, particularly if it's done under or only if it's done under the state auditor's purview and authority.
And James, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I don't need the 30 seconds. I think we're pretty much in agreement on this.
Okay. Mark, this next question, we're going to start with you. Funding for the state auditor's office has sometimes seemed like an easy area for state budget writers to cut. Do you believe the office is sufficiently funded, and what changes would you make or ask the legislature to make related to funding the office?
Right now, the state auditor's office is funded on a performance-based system, 1/100th of the sales tax. So if the budget goes up, it goes up. If the budget goes down, it goes down. That is a good way to fund the auditor's program. I don't think that needs to be changed. I think $30 million a year is, if we can build up and make sure we do quicker, faster audits, is adequate to audit all our government. We focus on performance and going after performance systems that try to improve the agencies. Remember, the goal of an audit is to help the agency you're auditing be better at what they're doing. So they're doing their own audits. Because right now, when you think about it, $30 million isn't enough, or $300 million isn't enough to audit all our government. And I'll give you an example. President Obama, when he passed that Recovery Act, had $500 million in audits. That's not how you improve government, because the focus of the audit should be actually improving the management of those governments and systems so they're improving themselves. So I would change the focus of using that $30 million up and down depending on the performance level of the sales taxes to focus on improving the management systems so those agencies are improving themselves, measurably getting rid of waste, measurably being more ethical, measurably being more effective, measurably taking care of their errors and defects so that everybody could see who's doing a good job and who's doing a bad job.
Troy?
Today, as we speak, I don't think the legislature is going to sweep anything. That's because they're not in session right now. So that it's a problem. We understand that. I think how I would address it is I would try to separate those funds as best as I can. There are other issues, and again, you have to work through the legislature and through the executive branch to do this, but I think the funds need to be separate so they're not in danger of being swept.
James?
Just a point here, they're already separate. There's a dedicated fund that you guys swept.
Different levels of that.
So what I want to say about the funding for the State Auditor's Office is overall it's a bargain for the state, for the citizens, and for the municipalities that get those audits. Overall, it's about a 0.25% or so of the state budget, the state spending and municipal spending and so forth. It's a drop in the bucket, and it returns huge dividends, so we're not going to see some cuts there. It is a favorite target of the legislature, which seems to want to reduce the authority of the state auditor, reduce the ability of the state auditor to do its job and to help improve the performance of some of these states. I think the really interesting question to ask here is why do these guys keep voting to take away the independence of the state auditor and try and diminish it? I just think that's not reasonable. You know, they've tried different things at various times on the legislative level. Two of the three opponents even tried to impose a kind of a bounty system for audits where they would be paid sort of on the results, and they're kind of gotcha audits. And you know, that kind of stuff doesn't work. Citizens of Washington State want a clean, independent state auditor, and that's what we're going to give them.
And Mark, you have 30 seconds for a response.
Again, the issue is how do you spend the money for the state auditor's office each and every year to get the best results? That's the question you need to be asking us is how are we going to be auditing? What are we going to audit? How are we going to improve government? You can throw out words like we're going to be a watchdog or whatever it is, but the question is how do you do that? How do you measurably improve government? What do you audit? That's it is, and we can give the state auditor's office $300 million. Unless you know how to audit and what to audit, you won't make a difference.
This next question comes from our audience, and Troy, you'll be the first to respond. Brian Sontag has been an outspoken champion for open and transparent government, including supporting legislation to require recording of executive sessions and serving on the board of directors of Washington Coalition for Open Government. What would you do to improve government transparency, and would you be an outspoken advocate like Brian Sontag?
Short answer is yes. I think that's an important job that falls right on the state auditor's office. One, they're there to get government accountability across the board, like I said, whether they be performance audits or financial audits. This is another area, though. We need to get full accountability. And just to put a little bit more on top of that, when you get your document request, when you get your record request, if it's not timely, it doesn't really matter. You need to get them in a timely fashion. I know he's done a great job. I know the Attorney General's been working hard in this area as well, though there are, I guess, some attorney-client privilege issues there. But again, I think I would follow Brian's lead in that area.
James?
Yeah, well, let me start by saying I am passionate about open government, because if we do not have an open, transparent government, then the press can't do its job, citizens don't know what the government is doing, and it makes it very, very difficult to have a fully functioning democracy. Our government should be about us, not about them. This is another area of very clear difference between us. My opponents, most of them have voted to various times to allow more holes in the open meeting laws, and one of them even sponsored a bill to ultimately ended up reducing the penalties for violating those record requests, and that's the kind of thing that we can't have. One of the things that I would like very much to do as state auditor is to work with the Attorney General and work with the new governor, work with the legislature to put in new penalties around the idea of blocking sunshine laws, blocking access to public records. We have a law now in the federal side called Sarbanes-Oxley, which actually criminalizes bad behavior on the part of businesses when they block access to their publicly available financial records and statements and that sort of thing. I think we need to look at something like that for government employees that are blocking access to citizens to legal requests for public records that delay. I think there need to be actual personal, financial, and possibly criminal penalties for that, because we need to have a very transparent, open government.
Mark, you have 90 seconds.
Okay, this is a difference. This is how I will do it as state auditors. I'll be evaluating every agency about how well they do in open government. What are their measures? Who does it fastest? Does anybody here know which city or county or state agency is the best or the worst? I actually asked that in a hearing. My goal is that you will know who's the best, the fast, the cheapest, the most ethical. Those measures will be on the web. I'll be auditing to those standards. And guess what? If you start putting that information out, guess what? The low performers will get better. Do you know which ones are the ones that have their head in the sand as far as replying to the customer? Crummy customer service. You will know when I'm state auditor. And guess what? In a few years, everybody will be good. We'll have the best open government in the country, measurably. That's how you do it if you elect a state auditor who actually knows how to audit, knows what to audit, and knows performance management. That's my promise to you.
And Troy, you have 30 seconds.
If I could just hit the executive session part again. Executive session really is for reviewing salary or other personal issues for one employee, usually a non-management employee. It should never be used for policy discussions. I feel very strongly about that, and I would discourage and oppose any attempt to do that.
James, this next question also comes from the audience, and we'll start with you. The state auditor runs the Whistleblower program that enables state employees to report waste, fraud, and abuse without fear of retaliation. Has this program been effective? What would you do to encourage more state employees to help identify problems and ways to improve the operation of state government?
Yeah, I think the Whistleblower has been tremendously effective. I've talked to a lot of state, can you guys hear me okay? Yep. I've talked to a lot of state and local employees that have everybody that I talk to in government says, hey, you've got to look at this, you've got to look at this, you've got to look at this. And a lot of those guys do take advantage of the Whistleblower, and I think that's important. And I think that's something that we need to encourage going forward. I think that right now there's a lot of access to that. There are the 800 numbers, there's the online forms and that sort of thing. There is a very, very good response time from the team that is doing that. And they've driven some tremendous results from that. And in fact, the head of the fraud organization has actually won a national award as a result of that work in the Washington State Auditor's Office. He's here tonight. So that's something that's working well now, and I think that we need to keep that up. I just want to make one more comment about open government. One of the things I'm very proud of is that I've been endorsed by Toby Nixon, who is president of Washington Coalition for Open Government, which is a really big deal for me. Thank you.
Mark?
Well, I've dealt with this issue. This is how I will do it as state auditor. Again, you can start realizing what my answer is going to be. I'll be evaluating consistently every single agency on how well they do with whistleblower. I don't know if you know this, but we pay $5 million in fines every year for whistleblower complaints that succeed in penalties. Do you know what agencies does it worse? The best? Like me as state auditor, you will know. And I can guarantee you in 3 years, we will measurably improve the ethics of every agency whistleblower. The goal is to get every agency down to 0 whistleblowers. 0. And I will set up a plan by a series of audits to use to audit all agencies. So, and again, it's public pressure. When you know that it's DSHS or DOL or whatever happened agency is doing bad, public will rise up and say, fix it. My goal is to have 0 retribution, 0 lawsuits. But that's what you do if you go in, if you know how to audit, what criteria and questions to ask, and you put that information out to the public, a public scorecard. Do you want that? Do you think that will work? That's how you have good ethics in government. You hold people accountable. It's got to be measures and process improvement, training, developing a workforce system where you're reaching out to stakeholders and customers alike. As state auditor, I know all that stuff. I've done that stuff. I've audited that stuff. Elect me as state auditor, you will know, and we will go have 0 whistleblower complaints. That's the goal.
The whistleblower program is very substantial. I think it's working, but there are cases where it's clearly not. I'm from Pierce County. I would concentrate on some of our local jurisdictions. If anyone's aware of the Assessor Treasurer's Office, it's a mess. Republicans and Democrats alike agree that there's problems there. In this case, it's an elected official, not quite as easy. But the bottom line is there's employee after employee that they're being terminated, either constructively or terminated by the Assessor Treasurer. The program's not working. He's still conducting business the way he is. The bottom line is it costs us money. I think we paid out about $1.5 million in settlements, and we're not even anywhere close. The recall effort failed because of the extremely high turnout in 2008. Thankfully, he'll be out of office very soon, but again, at what cost? So we do need to beef up the program, particularly with local jurisdictions.
And James, you do have 30 seconds for a response.
Yeah, just a quick comment. As far as I know, there's only one organization in the history of the world that didn't need whistleblowers, and that was the 12 Apostles. And as I recall, they had problems with one of those guys. So the fact is, we are always going to need whistleblowers. We are always going to have whistleblowers, and we need to have those programs available and robust.
And we do have time for one last question. Mark, we'll start with you. This, again, is a question from our audience. Would you support legislation requiring state agencies to either comply with audit recommendations or justify their reasons for not doing so?
Yes.
Do you want to expand?
I think all agencies need to come up with justification to why they're not following an audit finding. The issue is, and this is the hard one, is when somebody comes back with a justification that's nonsensical. So somehow we need a system in place where we auditing or holding accountable the justifications. Because just example, too many of the audit findings that I read and responses from the state agencies are nonsensical. So that's where you need to come back and come back with a grade. Do you have a state auditor who's willing to evaluate those findings and says, that justification is poor, doesn't work? Now that's tough. You have to know how to do this. But that's what you need. Because right now they already give justifications, but a lot of them are nonsensical.
And Troy, you have 90 seconds.
Yes, I think the answer is easy, yes. But again, the devil's in the details. You have to be able to specifically say what is justification. If not, the loophole eats away the rule. So I would agree 100%. There's only a few people that could particularly write that specific bill. I think when Representative Milosha returns to the House, he should sponsor it.
And James, you have 90 seconds.
Yeah, and I guess that election is going to be in 2014 for Mr. Milosha. Look, the fact is you have to be very careful with the idea of giving the auditor the power to implement all of the auditor's suggestions. That would make the auditor the king of state government. It would make the auditor the executive of state government, would rather minimize the role of governor. And while that would be a lot of fun, probably for some of the folks on the panel, that is not the role of the state auditor. The role of the state auditor is to be that independent watchdog that calls out those issues and then takes those issues to the legislature and to the governor to allow the policymakers to make those decisions on the recommendations. The fact is that we have a very bright line between the policymakers in Washington State, which are the legislators. These guys over here are the policymakers. The governor is a policymaker. The auditor, his job is to look at that policy, to take that policy and figure out if it's being implemented effectively, if it's having its intended performance and that sort of thing according to the I-900 standards. That is the appropriate role of the auditor, not to make the auditor king or give him some powers that he really shouldn't have.
And Mark, you do have 30 seconds for a response.
I'll go back to why you have to build that trust with the voters, with the public, the stakeholders, and the agency director. The goal is to do those audits so that they want to implement the solutions. They desire, they have that drive for performance excellence, to get rid of waste, to be the best in the nation. So that's the important thing about this audit. You want to elect a state auditor who is going to go out there and be that champion for the voters and get everybody else in government to follow them. So that's how you get that measure looking good and how you get the agencies to comply. They know you're a great auditor, they know you're working for their interests, and they will implement what you say.
Again, the job of the auditor is to work for the citizens.
Gentlemen, you each have now 3 minutes for your closing. James, we'll start with you.
Sure. Tonight you...
You did. And we went through Unfortunately, we've only got time for so many questions, and so we did go. You,
would you have a bit of time? Would you ask question or go down further on the standard question, ask question number 8 on the 2 format?
yeah, certainly. So, Troy, we will start this with you. Scott, we've asked question 8.
You asked question 8, okay.
We did.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll see if I can find your question real quickly.
I had one. Do you want to ask him? Just have him ask his question.
Yeah, do you just want to ask your question, and then I don't have to thumb through all the cards?
Well, I would rather you just read it, because that takes the time to write it. Anyways, the question is to all of you. What do you know about CAFR, Comprehensive Financial Annual Report? And would you make it a point, if you were to be the auditor, to give more transparency to what CAFR is, to the people of this state, and the importance of it? That's basically my question.
Thank you. And Troy, we'll start with you.
Well, I'd like to get more of the background on that, but I'm just going to go with the government needs to be more transparent. We need to make sure that we are as transparent as possible. If you'd like to talk after, we can do that.
I concur.
I agree.
Okay. Did you need 30 seconds for a response? Okay. We'll now get into our closing remarks. James, we'll start with you. You have 3 minutes for your closing remarks.
Great, thank you. So you guys have heard us talk a lot up here tonight. Are you still having fun? Yeah. All right. It's great to have you guys come out on a Thursday night like this. So you've heard very clear differences between me and my opponents. And as you go to the polls, I truly hope that you'll choose to support me in my role as state auditor and to help me elect to that office. You know, we have got a long history in Washington State of being a very populist state, of being a very citizens-oriented state. We have only elected a sitting legislator in our state once in the state's history. It was a guy named Neil Chatham. And Mr. Chatham used the office for 4 years to advocate for higher taxes, for more tax collectors, and really used it to push his policies as opposed to using it in the traditional auditor's role. Turns out that was in 1897. The citizens of Washington State have not elected a sitting legislator for 115 years. And there's a reason for that, because they want somebody independent in that office that is going to look after the citizens and the taxpayers. Now, we have not done that for 115 years, and I'm pretty sure we're not going to do that this year, because the citizens of Washington State want an independent, nonpartisan guy that's going to go in there and do the job and do it correctly. Somebody that knows how to do performance audits because he's done 150 in the federal and the nonprofit and the private sector, and has done them so well that clients actually pay him to do them and they hire him again. And it's about building, as Mark said, building that trust. You absolutely have to do that. And the way you do that is to sit across the table from your clients and do the right things and really deliver on that promise of performance and making that better. And that is something I can and will do for the people of Washington State. So in this election and as we go to the polls in August and November, I really ask for your vote, I ask for your support, I ask for your endorsements, because we need an independent watchdog in Olympia. We need somebody that's going to look after the taxpayers and not the legislature. And we've got to have somebody there that puts performance above politics. My name is James Watkins, and I hope to earn your trust as state auditor. Thank you. Thank you.
And Troy, you have 3 minutes for your closing remarks.
More than any other office in terms of the state constitutional office holders, I think this office really does need to be staffed by someone that's extremely independent, extremely bipartisan. Very few of us have been down there in the trenches. I see a couple faces out there, a senator and a House member, that have been down there. And on specific issues, they've been able to fight that partisanship. It's easy to talk about, but it's actually hard to do. We can talk with our senator about the tough time that he had this past session. Again, I think I've been down there. I think I've shown that independent streak. I think working along with Brian Sontag for the last couple of years, I think has helped me tremendously. And I can't agree more that it's got to be, any audit could be politicized. And the people have to be aware of that when they're going in. This should not be a political office.
Thank you. And Mark, you have 3 minutes for your closing remarks.
I've been in this business ever since that disaster when I was doing performance audits of Boeing and the contract management system. I've dedicated my life to make sure that we have the best government, the most efficient and effective, that will restore trust in government. Again, we all can make promises. I will measure them on the web. You will know instantly right now whether government is more efficient and effective. Do you all know that we can actually measure waste in government? The best companies in the private sector do it. I did it when I worked at Goodwill. You can measure waste. I'll measure the waste in every single agency, and then we'll work to reduce it. Ethics, same way. And this is, again, a nonpartisan, independent issue, performance. Right now, there's probably a difference in belief in Democrats and Republicans. Maybe I'm wrong. Difference in belief about is government doing a good job. I'll measure whether Republicans and I'll measure whether Democrats trust government. And my goal is to raise that number. My goal is to have every single Republican, every single Democrat, and independent state say that their government is working correctly. Their government is being efficient and ethical, is reducing waste, that you can trust them. But I need your help, because we have to get all the elected officials, we've got all the other interest groups to buy into that vision, because the state auditor can't do it by himself in this job. He needs your help. So that's what I intend to do. I've told you the promises, how I will measure, how I work with the elected officials, local governments, schools, and measure their performance, hold them accountable year by year, and then you can hold me accountable in my office. And you'll decide whether to re-elect me 4 years from now, because the results will be on the web. I'm not going to hide from this. Change the measures 2 years down the road. I'll measure it. And I'll be getting input from you. So that's my promise to you, my hard, class, iron promise to you. And if I'm not doing the job, vote me out. Vote James Watkinson or Representative Troy Kelly in. But I tell you, you will like the results. You will be happy. Because my goal is to make you happy, make sure you're proud of your government. Proud that you trust your government to do the right thing for you. Right now, I don't trust our government, but you will. Elect me as state auditor. Mark Malosha, thank you very much.
Well, gentlemen, we certainly appreciate you being here tonight, taking time away from the campaign trail to do this. It's my pleasure once again to bring forward Scott Roberts from the Freedom Foundation.
Thanks, Blake. Thank you to the candidates once again for coming tonight. It's regular. I mean, these guys are in suits, but they're regular citizens and voters first, and it's those people rising up and putting themselves out in this way and running for elected office that is critical to making our system work. But more so, having the citizenry educated and knowing what these candidates are about and making informed decisions. That's at the heart of what the Freedom Foundation does. We're a 501c3, we're a nonprofit. We never have, we don't, nor will we ever endorse or oppose a candidate or a ballot measure. The IRS takes that very seriously, and so do we. We are able to offer events and venues like this at low or no cost because we have donors from all over the state of Washington, just like you. And if you would like to join the Freedom Foundation, we have information on the table out in the hall. Until next time, thank you very much. And on behalf of the Freedom Foundation, have a great 2012 in the election season.